Hey world, this is Ron Motter, and this is the Parks Inspiring Solutions Hangout. It's June 12th, 2014, and we are talking all about parks and protected areas around the world and previewing the World Parks Congress that will take place in November in Sydney, Australia. As I say, my name is Ron Motter from Planeta.com and a group called the Tapas, the Tourism and Protected Area Specialist Group. I'm joined here by a fellow Tapas Executive Committee member, Steve McCool. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Ron, and hi, world. How are you all doing?
We are receiving some questions. One participant was just asking, "Hey, nothing seems to be happening." So um, the truth of the matter is, we're starting around 5 minutes late, but we are hanging out right now. So, Steve, what's new in your corner of the world?
What's new in my corner of the world? Well, first of all, I want to say it's a beautiful day here. For those of you who don't know, I live in western Montana in the United States, in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of a ponderosa pine forest. Um, and it's absolutely gorgeous today. It'll be about 22, 23 degrees high. So, a beautiful day. The latest thing that I've been working on is, for some of you who are interested in one of the products of the World Parks Congress, is a fairly substantial book that will be coming out that's called Protected Area Governance and Management. It'll be the second edition. The book has about 30 chapters in it, one of which deals directly with tourism and visitation. It's something, that particular chapter, I'm not directly involved in. I'm involved in another chapter that deals with the whole idea of complex systems, the systems in which we operate, and how to think a little bit differently about managing parks and tourism, visitors, and all those kinds of things.
Excellent. Would you say your specialty is capacity building?
I'd say, yeah, my thing that I do a lot of now, since most of you don't know me, I am a quote retired university professor. My career dealt with basically management of visitors and tourism in protected areas, and now for the last 7 years, I've really focused in on working with protected area managers in a variety of different places and academics, particularly in Southern Africa and in Brazil, trying to build capacity of those academics as well as protected area managers in addressing many of the complex issues and opportunities associated with tourism and visitation in protected areas.
Do these parks, in your opinion, in your view, do these parks have more in common with one another, or are they truly distinct in terms of management and visitation?
Well, they are obviously very distinct in the sense of their um, biophysical setting and the cultural values that are involved, and the particular values associated with the vegetation or the geology of the area that resulted in them being set aside. But on the other hand, they do have a lot of common opportunities and challenges, things that we see time and again. For example, how to manage visitors, how to provide opportunities for high quality experiences, how to engage the nearby communities and other constituencies in securing support for the protection and management. How can we, and in this age of complexity and uncertainty and contentiousness, how can we think differently, dive deeper below the surface of the ocean along an iceberg, dive deeper to find out what's really driving a lot of these particular challenges that we have. So those things are questions that really a lot of parks have in common. How we address those questions, however, varies distinctively from park to park, from country to country, region to region around the world, because the resolution of these challenges is something that is dependent on the local political, social, and cultural context, principally.
Okay. Now, you said you were a professor at a university. Where were you teaching?
I was teaching at the University of Montana. I taught there for about 30 years, um, and before that at a couple of other universities. Um, so we have a strong program in managing visitors in protected areas, nature-based tourism, communities and natural resources, those kinds of things. In many ways, Montana is like a lot of the world uh, in that the natural environment really dominates the geography of the state, particularly in the western part of the state, which is mountainous and forested. It has a low population density. State is 40 million hectares in size and has just 1 million people. In fact, we have twice as many cows in the state as we have people. Um, and it has for a U.S. state, it has relatively low per capita income, somewhere around 80% of the national average. A lot of people living on the margin in small communities that are vulnerable to decisions made elsewhere.
And does Montana have any national parks or state parks?
We have a good state park system. In fact, it's its 75th anniversary. There was just an article in today's newspaper, which is called the Missoulian. So if you want to read about our state parks, you can go to the Missoulian.com and look up state parks in today's newspaper if you're interested. We have about 50 of these parks, and they're scattered all around the state, some large, some small. And then we have two national parks, Glacier National Park, which is just north of where I live, about 300 kilometers, maybe not quite that much far. And then also Yellowstone National Park. Part of Yellowstone is located in Montana. Most of Yellowstone National Park is in the state of Wyoming, but part of it is in Montana. And one of the kind of interesting historical facts about Yellowstone National Park, the political pressure for establishing this area as a national park back in 1871 and 1872 came from the territory of Montana. That was before Montana was an actual state. Not from Wyoming. It was Montanans that wanted Yellowstone to be a national park, be protected as a national park. They didn't know quite what a national park was because there weren't any prior to that, but they figured it out. And so Montanans feel have a strong sense of ownership in Yellowstone, even though most of the park is in a different state. So we have that, and then we have a variety of cultural sites, monuments, and battlefields. Two battlefields that were battles between the American cavalry or army and Native American tribes that occurred in the 1870s. So those are important features of the state. And then we have a couple of wild and scenic rivers and a whole bunch of things. Lots of national forests, lots of designated areas designated as wilderness, which is a unique land classification unique to the United States.
Beautiful. We're going to get a link to that Missoulian article about the state parks. And I did want to touch base. I know that you've traveled a bit for attending other workshops and seminars, and that Missouri also hosts international visitors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
About Missoula. We host every year in cooperation with the U.S. Forest Service and also with the University of Idaho an international seminar on protected area management. It occurs generally starts beginning of July and goes for 3 weeks. And it's limited to somewhere between 25 and 30 participants. It's taught in English. People come, it's too late, incidentally, to get for this year because we're all booked up. So we spend 3 weeks discussing protected area management, but much of that discussion is out in the field. We spend time in Glacier and Yellowstone National Parks, for example. We take people to the edge of wilderness, and where they spend several nights camping in large tents, in an area that has no electricity and no cell phone service, no connection to the internet. And it's not even to the point where we call wilderness. It's next to wilderness, but not quite there yet. And then we interact with park and protected area managers, local citizens when we talk about local engagement in conservation, things like that. So that occurs, as I said, every July. It's on our 15th year. We've had, I think, people from about 80 countries participate, well over 400 people in that. And for the past 5 years, I've been one of the co-directors of the seminar. And then we also work with the U.S. Forest Service in its International Programs Office in, as I mentioned earlier, building capacity in protected area managers and academics in South Africa and in Brazil. And in Brazil, this past 6 months, we've held 2 courses, one in cooperation with Colorado State University, Jim Barbarak. I don't know if he's going to join us or not later, but
hopefully he'll be joining us. Either if he's not joining us this morning, hopefully he'll be joining the late afternoon hangout.
Okay. So we've one was on basic introductory course to public use planning, and incidentally, these were principally for national park managers in Brazil and more specifically in the Amazon region of Brazil, although it wasn't limited to that. One on public use planning, another workshop that focused on monitoring impacts from visitors, both the biophysical and the social, as well as the economic impacts. And then in May, we had a seminar, about a 10-day seminar, that was in the Amazon, that focused just on kind of a building awareness of the issues and opportunities and challenges of dealing with public use, tourism, and visitor management in the Amazon region. And that one involved not only national park managers, but also people from local communities and other people from nearby municipalities and tourism marketing organizations and so on. So it's
can you paint a broad picture? I mean, we're hearing quite a bit about Brazil since, well, today is the beginning of the World Cup, and
which starts today.
And I know that the U.S. will play in that stadium in the Amazon in Manaus.
Yeah.
But paint us a broader picture of who runs the national parks in Brazil, and what are we, what's it like?
Well, the agency that is responsible is called the Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation. It's located within the Ministry of the Environment, and the Chico Mendes Institute has a number of responsibilities that deal with conservation specifically, one of which is to manage national parks. And so they have a great dedicated staff. They don't have a lot of staff, and in that sense, they are probably similar to a lot of park management agencies outside of North America. They probably have one professional staff member per every 600,000 or a million hectares. So they don't have a lot of staff. They don't have a lot of visits to their national parks. They have about 5 to 6 million visits. 6 million, I think it is now, last year, to their parks. About I'd say 40% of those visits are to two national parks. Iguazu, which many of you know is a World Heritage Site and located on the border between Argentina and Brazil, which of course are also bitter soccer rivals. Um, and they each, excuse me, I have two dogs here who are acting up. um, the uh, the Iguazu is this large waterfall, and of course Argentina and Brazil both proclaim to have the best side of the waterfall. Any rate, and then there's the um, La Tijuca National Park, which is just outside of Rio, and that park is extensively visited as well, uh, primarily because the famous statue, Christ the Redeemer, is located within the park, and that's where people that visit Christ the Redeemer statue generally don't know they're actually in a national park. But that's where probably 40% of all the visits occur into Brazil national parks. So that's a little bit of background. Their parks have a lot of restrictions on use. Most of their parks don't, outside of those two and a couple of others, don't have very much in the way of facilities developed for visitor use, and particularly in the central Amazon region, which of course is kind of difficult to get around there. You get around by boat primarily.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a good diversity of types of parks. They have the whole bunch of parks. They also have what are called extractive reserves and sustainable development reserves, under which multiple use management occurs. That means timber extraction, carefully managed, food, non-forest wood products, non-timber forest products, excuse me. Those kinds of things are carefully managed in those. Those may allow fishing. In Brazil's national parks, no fishing is allowed. And no hunting actually is allowed any place in Brazil. They're quite surprised when we talk with them about having hunting in the United States. So the managers are probably very similar to the managers in other places in terms of their backgrounds. Most of them are biologists, those kinds of things. But they're very dedicated. Many of them would like to see more public use in their parks. And of course, one reason why we are engaged is to build their technical skill capability so that they can prepare and manage for that public use much better than what they're at in the current stage, or at least before the project started. So it's a great national park system. I can't remember the size of it right now, but they have lots of areas and lots of different kinds of areas, lots of different kinds of uses, and very similar to what you would find in a range of parks in other countries.
Well, we'll make sure that we add a link to the Chico Mendes Institute.
Right.
But I have to ask you a touristy question then. For a foreign visitor, and let's just say people we're familiar with, people from North America, what national parks in Brazil would you recommend, or give an example of what people could visit outside those two parks that receive so many folks?
Well, it kind of depends upon your landscape preference. One of the parks...
Desert! Where can you visit a park in the desert in Brazil?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I mean, there's a park there are parks in the Pantanal region of Brazil, which I am not personally familiar with, which are good, which is kind of like a wetland area. That's great for looking for wildlife. North of Brasilia, excuse me, about 3 hours is a park called Chapada dos Veadeiros, which is also a World Heritage Site, and it's in what's called the Cerrado, Cerrado, which is a different, more of a savanna landscape. It's not the tropical rainforest that you might envision in the Amazon basin. Although the river that flows through it goes into the Amazon, it's not legally within the Amazon basin because it's a very different vegetation type. But it's kind of a savanna. Very beautiful, has a beautiful river through it, lots of rapids, waterfalls. Um, you can do a one night, overnight backpacking trip with an outfitter, a guide, if you like. So most of the use is just day use in that park, going swimming in a river, um, which is interesting when you do that in Brazil because you're always thinking about things like piranhas and snakes and that kind of stuff. So uh, that's a neat park, and seeing some of the parks in the Amazon region itself is pretty neat. Just because it's a very different landscape type, and the skies there are just absolutely spectacular. And of course, you'll get wet, uh, um, but it's a warm wet, so you don't really get cold. And if you go up what's called the Rio Negro, which is where my experience is limited to, which is an incredible river. It's a huge river. One of the interesting characteristics of the Rio Negro, which is reflected in its name, is that it's very dark colored. That's clear but dark colored, and it's acidic because the water seeps through a lot of, or leaches through a lot of organic material. It's so acidic that there are no mosquitoes in the Rio Negro basin. So you don't have to worry about getting bit, take insect repellent, or getting malaria, that kind of thing. So it just kind of depends. Brazilians also like their beaches, and so there are parks out on the beaches and whole lots of things to see.
No doubt, no doubt. Now I want to share a screen here. I've met Steve through this group, the Tourism and Protected Areas Specialist Group, lovingly known as Tapas. And here's our Tapas page on the Planeta Wiki. A reminder for professionals who are working in parks and tourism, membership is free, and we have an online application form. And there are plenty of ways to engage. Back 4 years ago, no, 2 years, 4 years ago, yeah, Anna Spentley asked if I would help with communication, so I've been on board with that. But quite a bit of information for specialists who are working in parks and tourism. Steve, can you talk a little bit about this, the Koedoe special issue that's coming up?
Oh, Koedoe, yes. Right, there's Anna Spenceley, Anna and I, and Anna's the chair of Tapas, organized a special issue of Koedoe. Koedoe is a scientific journal that's produced by the South African National Parks Organization, which is called SANParks for short. And that special issue focuses on tourism and protected areas. It's the first time they've ever done anything like this. As you can kind of imagine, the journal, for much of its history, is really focused on the biology of South African national parks, and this is one of the first times that they've focused on something very different. And tourism is very important in South Africa in terms of its national parks. And so they've decided, we proposed this and helped them decide that we should have a special issue on this. And so there are a whole variety of articles. There's about 10 of them in the special issue that deal with everything from tourism and communities to what does a tourism research agenda look like. Some of you may be surprised that we even do research on tourism, but we do quite a bit. Also to some characteristics of the visitors and what visitors are expecting, and then even to the point of talking about the kind of frameworks one needs as a manager to think about how you would go about administering tourism in your protected area. So it covers those things, and it's just about ready to be printed up. Just in the next few weeks, it should be out. And that is an open access journal. And here's another link for Ron. This would be at sandparks.org. If you go to that, you will eventually be able to get to the Koedoe site.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I think we have excellent. We'll be, as I said, we'll be adding those links to this hangout, and I believe we already have a link on the Planeta Wiki. And I want to show you another screen. Hashtag World Parks Congress. This is the big event that's coming up in. This is the big event that's coming up in November in Sydney, Australia. This is a photo from our planning meeting in Cuernavaca, Morelos. Steve, you're attending the World Parks Congress. Can you give a little bit of a snapshot of what this event is?
Well, this Congress occurs every 10 or 11 years. I think the first one was in 1962, and in 1972 it was in the U.S. It's the only time it's been in the U.S. It was in Jackson Hole to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Yellowstone National Park. And then it was in Bali, and then it was in Caracas, and then the last time in 2003 it was in Durban, and this year it's in Sydney. The Congress involves probably 3,000 to 4,000 attendees. I would expect it to be close to 4,000. This time it was about 3,000 in Durban. It covers a whole variety of issues, challenges, topics, all centered around conservation and the protection of biodiversity and cultural values. It involves managers from protected areas, activists who pursue protecting more areas as parks or other kinds of categories. It involves scientists who do not only just biological research or biophysical research, but also scientists who engage in social science research. For example, what's the economic impact of tourism? And so what are the expenditures of visitors, and what are the jobs created? Or scientists that ask the question, well, how can we provide a good quality experience? Or scientists who ask about, well, what are the biophysical impacts or social impacts of tourism in national parks? And it involves a lot of development specialists, people who see national parks and other similar protected areas as engines of economic development. So how can we use these to, say, for a small country, and to gain foreign exchange? For example, Namibia, the southwestern continent of Africa, its market for its national parks are upscale Europeans, people who are willing to spend a lot of money, and that's one way. That's one of the major thrusts of its economic development strategy. The final category that we often see and will be there are indigenous people, people who have strong linkage with the environment and who have a lot to say about that linkage and how we go about making sure that linkage from their perspective is not damaged. So it lasts for, I think, about a week, 7 or 8 days.
It's November 12th to the 20th.
Okay, yeah, there you go. And usually at the opening ceremony, there are very high-level people, like in South Africa, in Durban. We had the president of South Africa. We had Nelson Mandela, and we also had Queen Noor from Jordan, all on the stage, opening stage at the same time. And I know in Venezuela, the president was there as well. So it attracts a lot of high-level people, a lot of high-level discussions, and there are lots of outputs, one of which is an action plan for the next 10 years on how, at a global level, how to protect national parks and other similar kinds of protected areas.
Okay, and you are planning on attending this event?
Yes, right. And then there are also, in addition to the sessions, there are field trips associated with this where you would go out from Sydney and spend a day out in a national park or conservation area learning about some topic that you're interested in. There'll be multiple. There'll be dozens, I'm sure, field trips.
Have you been to well have you been to Australia before?
Yes, I've been to Australia several times, to Sydney and as well.
And have you decided on what field trips or the places you'd like to visit while you're over there?
Not at this point, Ron. Yeah, I'm still just in the pre-planning stage. Just like the registration, for example, there's an early bird registration fee, so or a discount, early bird discount. So that's the planning stage I'm in is getting the wherewithal to put up the money for the registration. So,
How much is a registration fee?
well, for IUCN members or commission members, I'm a member of the World Commission on Protected Areas. That Tapas is part of that. It's $770. And so if you're a non-member, it's a bit more expensive than that. If you're an indigenous person or a person from developing country, it's 385, which is much more reasonable.
I hear you.
Okay.
Well, we are paying attention to the World Parks Congress, and as part of Tapas, Tapas will be having a few
That's right.
s- uh, uh, publications. How do we say this, Steve?
Session.
What will Tapas's gift to this
Yeah.
Congress
Well,
be?
I tell you, right. The Tapas is doing several things. First of all, we're going to be launching the revised edition of the best practice guidelines for managing tourism in protected areas. So this is about the third or fourth edition that this has come out. The last one was released in 2002, just before the World Parks Congress. I happen to be one of the co-authors on this. So it had to be revised. You know, things change quite dramatically. So the new edition is coming out then. It'll be quite a substantial document. We are also releasing the Koedoe Journal special issue, a special issue of Parks, which is the IUCN publication on the science of park management. That particular special issue dealt with the role of tourism in protected areas in supporting what are called the HE targets that were developed by the Conference of the Parties of the Convention of Biological Diversity. Kind of a big mouthful here. In 2010. So those targets are the kind of a long-range plan for the CBD, for those of you who aren't familiar with that. So there's a special issue of Parks that deals
Hey, wait,
directly.
what's the CBD?
That's the Convention on Biological Diversity. Okay? And so that was developed in 1992 at the Rio conference, if I'm correct, and is actually an output of the World Parks Congress that was held before then. So those are those products. There'll be a bunch of sessions on various aspects of managing tourism in protected areas, working with local communities, and all kinds of other topics. There is the Protected Area Governance and Management book, as I mentioned before, which Tapas has had participation in it. And by the way, that particular book will be about 1,000 pages long, and it's going to be released as an ebook as well as a physical book. You probably just want the ebook so you don't have to pay for extra baggage back to your hometown when you leave the park. So those will all be put on little USB flash drives.
And they'll be available for download as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They'll all be available for download. There's a couple of other things I can't think of right now that we're doing as well. I think we have a couple of capacity building sessions, but So the tapas will be visible there at the World Parks Congress.
Oh,
And
excellent.
if you've never been to one and you've got this interest, try to get there because it's a nice mixture of science, management, activism, and culture. Because at the plenary events, there's usually some kind of cultural celebration, dances, and this kind of thing by the indigenous groups.
Beautiful, beautiful. It sounds like it will be a wonderful
Mm-hmm.
event.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Steve, we're coming up to the end of our hour here.
Yeah.
We have three viewers. I'm not sure if we have any in real time. I'm not sure if anyone wants to ask a question,
Yeah.
but
Go
uh,
ahead. Yeah.
I do want to mention that we are having I'm hosting another hangout in 8 or so hours, 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, if there's interest. And we're going to try to do this on a monthly basis before the World Parks Congress, and hopefully during the World Parks Congress, we'll find ways of sharing what's new happening live
Mm-hmm.
around the world. And Tapas will be continuing its work, doing all sorts of wonderful things in 2015. So we'll be paying attention to that. Uh, I wanted to mention, I have one answer, but what are the upcoming events that people who are interested in parks should be paying attention to? Does anything come to mind?
Are you asking me, Ron, or the
I'm
group?
asking you.
Oh, well, there's the World Parks Congress, obviously, for those people that live in the United States, maybe northern New Mexico or Canada. There is a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act, which is going to be in October, the month, just exactly a month ahead of time. That's in Albuquerque, Wilderness 50th Congress. That's as much a celebration as anything else. Um, I'm just trying to think now, Ron. You caught me kind of unaware,
Well, think
unprepared on
about
this
it.
one.
I know early, coming up July 16th to 18th is the Congreso de Áreas Protegidas in
Okay.
Colombia.
Yeah.
This weekend for friends in Nevada is Nevada State Parks Free Admission Day.
Okay.
Love the Free Admission Day events.
Mm.
1 second, we have a comment over here from Lloyd Gardner. Um, is there any idea of what a tourism and protected areas agenda would look like after the Congress?
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Lloyd, that's a great question, and it's good to hear from you. It's been a long time since we've communicated directly. Um, I think that's something, Ron, that maybe we ought to think about in terms of tapas. As you know, think strategically about what do we want to do for the next decade. So I don't think we've thought about or talked about this question. So and Lloyd, what things would you like to see? Uh,
And Lloyd, what are you doing? I know there's going to be a symposium on coastal tourism development, um, and we'd like to pay attention to that. So let's see. The symposium on coastal tourism development will take place in Granada. That's
hmm,
July 9th to the 12th that Lloyd just sent me.
hmm,
Excellent.
mm-hmm,
But yeah, going back to an agenda, you know, it makes sense to take a broader look and to make our plans for 2020. What do we want to what are the ideas?
mm-hmm.
The United States, help me out, Steve. I know the United States is approaching its centennial of national parks, and that's in
Yeah,
2016.
that'll be 2016. The Park Service has a series of studies and papers that are in the process of being prepared to talk about the what should be its next century like. You know, where should it go? Um, so that'll come up in 2 years. I'm sure it'll be a great celebration. Um, so that is happening, but I don't think there are, at least as far as I'm aware, any specific ideas of where or who might be sponsoring a conference or symposium or celebration. At least at this point, I'm sure there's some thought on it, but I'm not involved in that.
We'll find out. I know next July is the second Healthy Parks, Healthy People Congress.
Okay, and that
And
is that in Australia?
no, that takes place here in the U.S. in the
Oh,
city
okay.
of Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
But you know what? Hopefully, what we can do through the Planeta Wiki, at the very least, is to compile the list of upcoming events and find out
Right.
what's on the calendar, and then find ways of having a discussion of people who are, you know, working on parks
Yeah.
and tourism related issues to define such an agenda.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
frankly, when I consult with and talk with people who are working with parks, I don't know if you've noticed this, Steve, but often tourism just it's acknowledged, but it really isn't. It really isn't on the agenda for these folks.
Right. Yeah. No, it's our kind of invisible economy. The thing I thought about, Ron, and this get kind of in one sense gets to Lloyd's question, is thinking about healthy parks and viable communities, playing off the healthy parks, healthy people thing. If we can have good, healthy parks, and we can have viable communities that are interacting with those parks, would be very useful to think about how can we do that. What would be our long-term strategic plan, which I think is what uh, Lloyd is asking about.
Sounds great. As we begin to wrap up this conversation, anything else we're missing in terms of broad topics to discuss, Steve?
Well, I think one of the things that strikes me in doing a lot of reading, which is what I do a lot of reading, is that we need to figure out ways to archive our experiences, in particularly with respect to the interaction among tourism communities and protected areas. We have thousands of case studies, but what we really need to do is to build on those case studies and try to kind of synthesize what it is that we've learned. Because what I see is just as lots of individual studies, but without people actually diving deeper to see what's common across these. What are the lessons learned? What are the insights that we've gained in that arena? I think we also could start thinking about how do we make parks more relevant to people. And I think that was one of the goals of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, particularly in the whole notion of ecosystem-based services. And that makes that connection in a very utilitarian way. My belief is that the world is run by passion, and what we seem to be missing is more of the emotional side of the relationship between parks and people. And how do we inspire people? How do we get people into these environments? I'm not worried so much about them being devastated, because the history is that most of these national parks are not devastated by visitors. There are places within them that are, and actually, it's not devastated by visitors; it's devastated by poor management of visitors. Um, but how do we make this connection in a passionate way? Passion makes the world go round, and so how do we get people to really think about the importance, spiritual importance, their lifestyle importance of parks? And we can do that through good visitor management, through providing high quality opportunities for visitors.
I hear you. I mean, I do like the idea of if as we try to archive, as you say, the archive the experiences to create that meaningful annotated bibliography.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to me, the solution is simply to have some of those roundtable discussions where you have visitors and locals
Mm-hmm.
talking with one another.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, through there's a website called Outbounding that curates travel features and travel stories.
Mm.
And we
Okay.
were talking this week about responsible photography, or
Mm.
tourism photography, which I always invariably bend toward responsible tourism
Right.
photography.
Yeah.
Because often we have this culture where the visitor wants to take a lot of photos to basically say I was here. And what I would like to suggest and put on the table are creating those events in which we get locals and visitors together and to do some sort of a photo walk and to
Mm.
basically use that as an experience of learning from one another. Because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, we keep on putting the other person, whether it's the other person or the other landscape, on the remote side of the lens.
Mm-hmm.
And we visit, but we don't really interact that much. And we certainly don't, pay attention or listen to locals about their concerns and their
Mm-hmm.
experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think it's time for a great rebranding and reinventing of the whole tourism experience because we have these, outside of being in a near wilderness experience, we have these cell phones, which are also cameras, which are also guidebooks, which are also GPS maps,
Mm-hmm.
and we're already using them. And the question
Mm.
is, how do we use them better, and how do we use them again to foster the conservation and the
Right.
appreciation
Yeah.
of local culture?
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. So there's a world of opportunity out there for doing some really neat and good things. So,
So,
yeah.
well, Steve, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank
We're
you. It's
coming up
been a
to,
great conversation.
as I said, we'll try to do this on a monthly basis, and also on a request basis. I was just chatting yesterday with friends from the Columbian Parks Department, and we'll be organizing a special hangout at a time of their convenience, the first week of July.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fascinated by this topic and happy to host a hangout to discuss these issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always a pleasure, Steve, to chat with you.
Yep. Same here, Ron. And hopefully our viewers out there uh, engage this discussion well.
Yeah, people who are watching, keep an eye on that event page on Google Plus Hangouts and on Google Plus, the event page, and we'll be adding some links. You're
Mm-hmm.
more than welcome to add your own links and your own comments, and we will be continuing these Hangouts in the near future. So thank everybody for your attention,
Yeah.
and stay on the line, but we're going to stop the broadcast here.
Yeah. Okay. Take care, everyone.